week, Madam Web dropped in theaters, and it would be an understatement to say that it did not go well for Sony. And while we're discussing the future of the Sony Spider-Man universe, Marvel Studios is reworking their own strategy for the future of the MCU, trying to reclaim the momentum that they had back 5 years ago around Endgame. So today I'm joined by Dan Merle, and we're talking about what is going right with the comic book movie genre, where did some of these studios go so far off the path, and what do they need to do to reclaim the excitement of the past? Let's talk about it. Transition, just a couple more things dropped yesterday since we scheduled this that felt thematically similar. An article dropped with The Hollywood Reporter yesterday talking about how the MCU is retooling. Now, they've put out this article every 2 weeks for like the last 4 months. Yeah. So the latest one, how Marvel is quietly retooling amid superhero fatigue, and kind of said a lot of things that we've known for months now. They're moving away from Kang. The next Avengers is no longer Kang Dynasty. They're still trying to figure out who their heroes are. They're reducing output. But where it kind of ties into the broader theme of what's kind of going on here, it feels to me like no one fully knows what to do with the comic book genre right now. There's still hits. There's still massive wins. But the MCU is trying to figure out how do we get back to the excitement that we had before? Because what we've done since Endgame has kind of dwindled the excitement. It hasn't really worked. So they're trying to retool. Obviously, DCU is doing a massive reboot because they completely killed the DCEU. Like, where do you see the world of comic book movies starting to come together? Like, what's the piece that feels like they've gotten wrong the last 5 years that maybe they can pull back together in the next couple of years?
Direction. I mean, I think that is the one key missing ingredient that the MCU has been missing since Endgame. Every movie from Iron Man, when Nick Fury said, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative," that launched you on a storyline that continued for 10 years to Avengers Endgame. That was over, and Marvel has yet to really... They've said what the storyline's going to be. Oh, it's multiverse. Okay, it's the multiverse. Okay, so we had a good multiverse Spider-Man movie, I think. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of other projects, and it's partly because of COVID and having the things mixed up a little bit. It's partly because of streaming and having so many more projects. But they've never really said what the story's going to be. They sort of started getting into it with Kang and Quantumania and Loki, but there's never been this thing of like, this is what this movie is, or this show is. This movie or show is this piece of the puzzle, and you have to watch this because you have to know this to get this. There have been little things like, okay, if you watch Ms. Marvel, then you'll know who she is in the Marvels. Okay, but that's not like, if I miss Captain Marvel the movie, then I'm not going to understand the next one. I'm not going to know what's going on in Endgame because I have to know who this character is to know what's going on in Endgame. They've lost that sense of urgency. A lot of it is corporate mismanagement on the Disney side of them saying you have to pump out 6 projects a year because we're building the streaming service. A lot of it is creative mismanagement on Kevin Feige's side, quite frankly, whether it's overextending or taking the eye off the ball, not understanding how to build a franchise in a way that makes every chapter seem important. The second that they seem like they're disposable, people start tuning out, and that's exactly what happened. They started seeming disposable. You'd have little things like, this idea of like, oh, people aren't interested in Marvel movies anymore. They are actually, if it seems like they need to go see them. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever did not do as well as the first movie, but was still a successful film, and one that people felt like, well, I have to go see it because I want to see what happens next. And that movie was in a tough spot. That movie's in a really tough spot through no choosing of their own. And yet people went and saw it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The only Marvel movie from last year that you could say was successful, I think. MCU movie, at least. And it was because it was a movie that successfully said, this is the end of the Guardian story, and this is why you have to go see it. So the movies that are succeeding are the ones that are able to say, this is why you need to go see this movie, because it does this. And that's what Marvel's got to get back to. They have to get people to understand why they need to watch certain projects. And by the way, if you're making a project that you can't come up with that idea for, You can't tell people why they should watch it. Maybe you need to rethink making that project.
Right. And when I think you talk about like this very strange blend of both, it doesn't feel, you're not sure why you need to watch these projects, but it also feels like homework. It's the wrong version. You don't get excited to be a part of this bigger universe. It's just, I have to feel like I have to watch these things to play catch up. And you talked about kind of on the Kevin Feige side of mismanaging the universe and not knowing how to build it out. It's confusing because that's what he did so well for the first 22 movies. And like the article says, the stakes for the movie are high as the studio is still searching for characters and actors who can carry its universe forward after the exits of Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. And I read that quote and I go, it doesn't even feel like you're trying to do that. Because you launched Shang-Chi and we haven't seen him in 3 years and we don't know when we'll see him again. And you're like, we'll do Moon Knight, and you do it shotgun style, but then you didn't pick the hits and go, now let's get that one going. You just threw all these characters out there, so we don't know who to focus on. We haven't seen them interact with each other the way that it was like, let's introduce our Avengers, we'll do a team-up movie. And then we'll do their standalone movies, and we'll bring them back together in 3 years. So we're seeing the characters a lot. We're seeing them together. There's relational momentum. There's story momentum. We have the target that we're moving forward. It just feels so scattered. And they say like, hey man, we're trying to figure out who are going to be our stars now. Chris Evans as Captain America was not the star of the MCU when Captain America: The First Avenger came out. It did okay, it did decent, it didn't bomb, but compared to what Winter Soldier did, compared to what Civil War did, compared to the way that this quote is talking about him, that is not who he was when he first appeared. But that's where they have all of the new characters. They're still in that state of, we introduced them, people know who they are, but we haven't built them out as part of this universe with the other characters in a team-up movie or anything like that. And it feels so strange that they cracked the code. They figured out what worked. And then they went, let's do something different and oversaturate in the weirdest way possible.
Yeah, it's I don't envy them because, Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, that's tough. That's tough to replace them. You've got Chris Hemsworth. That Thor movie wasn't really interested at all in being like, here's why Thor is now the main guy in the MCU. It was more like, here's a weird, silly, frivolous thing with Thor, and it's like, okay, it doesn't do anything to build the franchise at all. It was really just about Thor, it does feel like with Shang-Chi. I mean, that was a pandemic era. Like that movie set a record for which holiday was
September?
it? Was it Labor Day? I think it was Labor. I think that movie set like the Labor Day record in 2021 when it was so tough to get people to go to the theater. And you're right. And they haven't used him at all since then. Not even a promise that they're going to use him again. And it's like, and you're introducing thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. And I get it that you hope that Ms. Marvel was going to be a hit. I thought that I liked Ms. Marvel, actually. I thought that was a good show. I thought that Iman Vellani is great as the character, but it just didn't connect with audiences. She-Hulk, very divisive show. And again, I don't really see even the way you structure that show. It's not even in the MCU. It's completely outside of it. And so that's really the challenge here. What are you doing? Because people just don't want to see one-offs anymore. I liked Moon Knight. I liked some of the Marvel shows and movies, but what's the greater goal here? What's the greater purpose? And unfortunately, they kind of went all in with the multiverse. And other than No Way Home, none of their other multiverse projects have really clicked with audiences. People, they just don't, it just hasn't gone great. So yeah, I don't envy them the position that they're in, honestly. It's tough.
So with the restructuring, we've only got one movie this year. They're trying to, are you hopeful that they've learned the right lessons? Like, have they changed enough? Where are you kind of at with all of that?
I'm definitely hopeful. I mean, when Marvel movies work, I'm a huge fan of them. And, I'm not one of these people that's like, I mean, it's a whole internet industry that's sort of dominating the space right now. That's like death to Disney, death to everything that Disney does, because it's very lucrative to be a person on the internet that says that. And there's a sizable audience. for that.
I'm sure you've probably found some of this too, but like I have all sorts of people that want to like say that I'm moving in that direction. It's like, no, they haven't had a good couple of years, so I've been more negative. I was very positive about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's very positive about Loki Season 2. But when a project's not good, I'm going to say that. That doesn't mean that I'm part of this industry over here. I want them to succeed. I grew this channel because of the Marvel. I'm eternally grateful for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I only want the movies to do well, and I only want my kids to love them too. I want them to be as excited about them as I am. Yeah. But I'm not going to lie and say that things are going well when clearly things are not working like they were 5 years ago.
Well, yeah, when I do a story or a video covering sort of Disney's financial stuff or their business, what's going on business-wise, or all the stuff that's going on now with the contested board seat and all that stuff. Like when I covered Disney Store, I'm like, I had one video that was like Disney just had its worst year ever, and I just went over like all of the financial failures for them at the box office, hundreds of millions of dollars in box office losses, and there's people that just like, oh, okay, you're becoming one of those people. And I'm like, I'm reporting facts. I'm just telling you what's happening. Like these are things that are happening. Like just like concrete numbers that are happening. Right. Like I don't want, I say it all the time. I wish that every movie was great. I wish that, because if every movie was great, then that means that no matter what you went to see, you would have a good time and you'd enjoy it. That's just not the reality of it. And Disney has really, with streaming and everything, they really lost their way. They lost the focus. They lost the vision. Part of it was desperation. Part of it was just being overburdened with stuff. But I would love for the MCU to get back to where it was, because at its peak, it was great to have 3 to 4 comic book movies, superhero movies a year just from the MCU, not even talking about other companies, that were great. And if we could get a DC universe and a Marvel universe simultaneously making movies that are great, that would be so amazing, because there's so much potential in these properties.
Absolutely. And that's very much the way I feel all about, like, I've made a lot of videos being negative and covering it from a negative perspective, but that's because they made bad choices. And that side to it, like they call it the toxic positivity, the people that drank too much of the Disney Kool-Aid and they just can't see reality. Or like I remember last June, I said I was criticizing Elemental for not having very good marketing. Like, I'm not seeing as many trailers. They've only really put out one. And I don't think this movie's going to do very well out of the gate because they're not promoting it very well. And I had people coming at me like, you're part of the reason this movie's going to do poorly because you're being so negative. It's like, do you want me to lie and tell you that they put out a ton of trailers? Do you want me to lie and tell you that, like, I'm just telling, I have no reason to go after Pixar. Like, I have no motivation at all. Why would
That'd
I hate
be like
Pixar?
Punching a baby. Like going after Pixar would be like punching a child. Like, why would you ever like have a vendetta against Pixar? Well, I know why some people do, but for most people, it's like, why would you have an axe to grind with Pixar of all places?
Right, absolutely. So I think both of our cases, kind of similar situation. We want them to do well. Disney Plus, COVID, hubris. I think they went down the wrong path. Final thing I wanted to talk about, a little bit of rabbit trail. I just thought this was so weird, so strange, and kind of talking about the future comic book movies. But yesterday, a report came out, Joker 2, the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, cost $60 million, made over $1 billion. Yesterday, the reported budget came out, $200 million for Joker 2. And there's a side to it where you go, your movie made $1 billion, everybody gets a raise, you can do more extravagant things. Gotcha, some of that's fair. $200 million for a Joker 2? Like, I looked up the data, like, what was the budget increase for Deadpool 2? Also, Deadpool 1, surprise hit, doesn't make $1 billion, but becomes top 3 highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. Deadpool 2's budget was only $110 million.
Yeah.
And this is also, these are also people that are getting the very large paychecks. Ryan Reynolds deserves to get his $20 million for that movie. And big action movie, only $110 million. Where on earth is the money going on Joker 2? How do you even get up to $200 million with this movie?
Lady Gaga. That's probably 5-ish% of that budget, maybe more. Joaquin Phoenix is going to get a nice payday out of it. Todd Phillips, I bet, is going to get a nice payday out of it. I mean, I don't think it's going to visual effects unless they're doing a radical departure. I don't think it's going to go to a visual effects budget. I mean, this to me is obviously a case. If this is true, if this report is true and it's a $200 million budget, this to me says it's all going to the pockets of the creatives. And listen, you know, as the kids say, if you want to get your bag, get your bag. I mean, that's, you know, Joaquin Phoenix deserves to get paid more than $500,000 and 2.5% of the back end for a movie. I'm not going to begrudge him, but to me, it's, I think there was, I don't know if it was in that article or if it was a different article, but it was saying that the 2-year basically ban on shopping Warner Brothers around ends in April. And so the article that I was reading was saying they were theorizing that the reason that Warner Brothers is signing all of these big deals, they signed the big deal with Tom Cruise, they lock in people for Joker 2, you know, they're announcing all these movies, is basically to make the studio appealing, because Zaslav is going to turn around and try to sell the studio this year, which I think would be interesting. So part of me is just like, they wanted to make this movie because they could say they've got it on the books, because if they're trying to sell the studio, they can say like, we got Joker 2 coming out this year. And so they just gave people whatever they wanted. That's an interesting theory to me. I don't ever want to hear David Zaslav again say that he's shelving a movie because they're trying to save money. Oh, we can't release Coyote versus Acme because we're just so budget conscious right now. BS. Because the other thing that they did is the new Bong Joon-ho movie that was supposed to come out this year, they pushed to January. And that movie's got a like $150 million budget, I think, which again, great for Bong Joon-ho, but like, tell me how that investment works, unless you're just trying to lock in this contender, which, by the way, you've now, it seems like, pushed out of award season completely. They're making a lot of really odd decisions as far as budgeting for a studio that's so budget conscious. They're making very strange decisions as far as budgeting. And I think there may be some credence to this theory that I was reading, that they're locking in talent right now at a very high rate because they want it on the books when they sell the studio, because they can say, we've got this, and this lined up, and we're going to pay whatever it costs to get it on the books. That kind of makes it make a little more sense to me.
Right. So it's in the Variety article. It's the same one I had pulled up, and part of it says they're talking about all of these big things that they're putting out there. It says that time may be approaching. In April, Warner Brothers Discovery can entertain offers to buy, sell, or merge with a studio like NBC Universal, as many on the lot believe will happen. That's when the 2-year lockup period expires as of part of the 2022 deal that united Warner Media Discovery. And so exactly what you just said of 2 years is up, and all of a sudden, yeah, they're putting all of these things out there. You were like, what on earth is going on?
I mean, I've heard that theory floated about Zaslav before, that the reason he's been such a hatchet man and doesn't seem to care about severing creative relationships or shelving movies, writing them down, whatever, is because he was brought in to basically flip the studio. He was brought in to just like decimate the budget where he could, with no real eye on the long-term effects of it, because that's not what he's there for. He's there to flip the studio, make some money, and then it's somebody else's thing. Maybe, I don't know. Sounds like listen, Warner Brothers, this would not be something new for them to have a huge corporate merger and then undo it in very short time. That's sort of what they do. So that's interesting, because Warner Brothers is also studio, didn't they give Paul Thomas Anderson like $100 and some odd $million for his next movie that he's never made over $80 million? Like it's crazy. They're just handing out budgets like it's candy corn out there.
But right, I think when you can combine the two narratives, throwing insane amounts of money at certain projects, and then being like, well, these other ones, there's nothing here. It's a tax write-off. And you go, like, anyone with common sense, anyone with half of a brain looks at it and goes, this is weird. This does not add up. This doesn't feel like these are decisions made with integrity. It's very suspicious, and it feels like something very odd is going on. But yeah, when I saw that number, $200 million. You're trying to add it up. So the article says $12 million to Lady Gaga. We got $20 million to Joaquin Phoenix. Let's give $20 million to Todd Phillips. And you subtract that from $200 million. You're still talking about double the original budget for the first film. You go, What on earth?
That's more than Dune Part 2 costs.
Right,
Dune
exactly.
Part 2 costs less. It costs like $190, I think they said.
Yeah, $190.
So you're basically spending more for the second Joker movie than you did for Dune Part 2. Like, I don't even know. That's like Brewster's Millions. That's like, how do you even spend that much money on a movie like that? Like, are you making the set out of money? Like, I'm so curious how that
maybe
even works.
it's an insane asylum. Like, I think that's been so it feels like it's still a contained film. And compared when especially talking about Dune 2, which has a long list of movie stars in it, immaculate production, on locations, huge sets, immaculate visual effects. Everything is perfect. $190 million. I don't know. Those are the ones to me that, like, when a movie like Dune 2 exists with everything that it does under $200 million, and you look at all the other movies that cost more than that, that's the side of Hollywood where I go, what? How does this happen?
Nothing would delight me more than if they put out the trailer for Joker 2 and it is somehow on the scale of Dune Part 2. If it is, if Joker 2 is on the scale of Dune Part 2 somehow, then I'm back in. I'm back on board. Like I'm just thinking about $200 million anywhere close to the first movie.
Right.
If they're doing something radically bigger and experimental, then count me back in.
It's kind of closing out on that one. Joker 1 radically overperforms. And do you see any way that this movie could be profitable? Like, do you see a version of this that, like, okay, so what do you think would be realistic expectation for this? Like, I like go, where do you even go with Joker 2? It's a musical. I don't know what this movie is.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, you could tap into that same. Now, you're not going to get that same surprise factor that the first movie had, and obviously, you also have huge expectations now because Joaquin Phoenix won Best Actor, and it was an Oscar-nominated film. But this is the same creative team that was able to do the first movie, and so yeah, I think there's definitely a path to profitability. It's just that path now is so much narrower with that type of investment. And so, you really have to make sure your ducks are in a row. But I mean, listen, if they can come up with something as kind of anarchy ridden and not really concerned with the mainstream sensibilities and so penetrating on a character level, if they can somehow do that again, there's definitely a path to profitability. It's just a lot harder this time.
Right. Yeah, leaving the first film, it felt like such a bottle movie. Even where it ends, it's not in any way clear where you could go with this. When you make $1 billion, obviously the studio wants to make a sequel. So they say they're doing it. They say it's a musical. I just have so many questions. It's one where I'm just waiting for the trailer just to get some clue. What are they trying to tap into with this movie? What is the flavor of it? And then I go, Todd Phillips has done sequels in the past, the Hangover sequels, and I go, his track record there's not the best, but then again, there's a little bit more on the line here. There's some other pieces that could potentially bring him in, but yeah, I am so curious as to how this movie's going to go. Hey, thank you so much for joining today. This was a lot of fun. We're the comic book movie genre's in an interesting place, so it was fun to get to unpack all of that with you.
Thanks for having me on. It was great. Like you said, we talk to ourselves in these rooms so often. It's nice to have somebody on the other side of the camera lens.
And once again, where can we find you on the internet? What's something interesting coming up on your channel that you want to plug?
You can find me on YouTube at Dan Murrell. I'm not really on a whole lot of social media platforms. I'm on several, but I just don't post on them anymore. So YouTube's the best place to find me. And I do my box office show, Charts with Dan, is obviously the biggest place that I do every week. That's sort of my weekly show. I've got my review for Dune Part 2 is out now. My spoiler review is going to be out once it hits theaters on next Friday. So you can find that very soon. I don't know. I like doing business stories, but I try to make them sort of not boring. So I'm always got kind of like a bloodhound. I've always got my nose to the ground looking for like, what's the next little, like, oh, there's an earnings call coming up for, Paramount Pictures. Like, it may not sound interesting, but it actually is. And so one of the things I try to do on the channel is sort of contextualize why the Q4 2023 earnings call may sound dry, but like this is how it could somehow lead to Paramount Pictures disappearing forever. So that's the sort of stuff I also like to do here on the channel.
So thank you so much for joining me. I have been watching your content for over 10 years. He's very knowledgeable, very intelligent. And like he said, he's able to take stuff that sounds really boring and find the way that makes it interesting and actually connects to the movies that you do watch and why it matters. So that's why you need to check out his channel. The links will be all around here. And everybody, keep talking movies and TV.